Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Financial Independence through Small Multifamily Investing. I am Lawrence Latty, also known as Mr. International, host of this fine meetup. So tonight we have a very special guest, right? Mom, right? Full-time W-2 worker, right? Podcast host, right? Book club host. But before we get to who that is, right? We're going to go around the screen and ask everybody to share about a little about themselves. So we're going to do as we always do. We're going to start to my right, your left. Nathaniel, again, Nathaniel, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. Recent graduate from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So looking for that job search, and then hopefully by the end of the year, first property, multifamily or fixer up.
Good, thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Andrea.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Branch. I live in Atlanta, network engineer, and I've been investing for this is going on my third year. And I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you for coming, Andrea. Good hearing from you. So once again, my name is Lawrence Latty, host of Financial Independence with Small Multifamily Investing. And tonight, like I said before, we have a very special guest. As a matter of fact, Nicole Pendergrass was one of my first guests when I first started this meetup in 2021, right? And I've known Nicole for a while, right? We've met at one time before at the first Bronx, New York real estate meetup, right down 161st Street.
And Billy's.
And Billy's, right? There you go, Billy's, right? Near Yankee Stadium, right? But now we're here. Nicole's doing some fantastic things in real estate. She has a fantastic story about her journey. But tonight she's going to share with us her secrets for syndication. So Nicole, I want to say thank you for, like I said before, for sharing time with us and your kids, right? Thank you for coming on. Appreciate you. And the floor is yours.
Bronx in the house. Oh, yeah.
Whoop, whoop, BX.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want me to just jump right in, I guess I want this to be a little interactive. So I do have some slides, but I wanted to start with a couple of questions. So between the people who are here, has anyone not ever done a syndication? I'm assuming Nathaniel hasn't because he asked that question previously. Lawrence hasn't. Ethan, Andrea, have you guys have you done a syndication before or been involved with one?
I'm invested in one.
As an LP, okay. All right. Sounds good. Out of the people here who actually wants to be in a syndication on the GP side, like, is that anyone's goal? Okay.
That's a future goal.
Future goal, okay. And what roles are you guys that want to be invested in the syndication? What roles are you looking to have primarily?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, GP role, but GP role actually consists of different things. Like, do you want to be the deal finder? Do you want to raise capital? Do you want to be asset manager? Do you know, like do you want to have the relationship with the lenders and get debt financing? You know, there's different aspects of it, different skills to bring to the table.
I think raising cash.
Raising cash, okay. Latty, you thought about it? I'm waiting for you. Deal finder, okay, like that, okay. So I guess if you see yourself being a syndicator, what is your ultimate goal of being involved in syndication? And why do you think that syndication is the right methodology for you to reach that goal?
Because doing a bigger deal, you can't really do a JV, right? You need to raise more capital to get to a bigger deal, to get to that plateau.
What's a bigger deal going to provide for you?
A bigger deal will provide some source of financial independence.
Okay.
Right? Some source of financial independence.
Anyone else got an answer?
also, I think, you know, being in a GP role, you get to learn more. Um, so I like that aspect of the syndication.
Okay.
Did I answer that question right?
Yeah, that's a great.
And then also you don't you get more equity when you're a GP?
Okay, we will get into that.
Okay.
But yeah, so equity, education, and bigger financial freedom, right? So those are some reasons to want to get involved in syndication. All right, so let me just get started talking a little bit before I start my slides. I'm sure that most of you know the basic anatomy of a syndication is normally the limited partners will get 70% of the split of the deal, that's 70% of the ownership, and the general partners will have 30%. Now that's a general split. Sometimes it's 80-20, but and most likely it's going to be a 70-30 split. So you might be aware of that. But what a lot of people are not aware of is that splits get much more complicated with hurdles, waterfalls, different shares for different LP investors, and those shares may have different return metrics associated to each different kind of share. So they can really be a lot of different layers with the splits between the GP team and the LP private investors, right? GPs get the smaller share of that, like out of the 100%, the GPs getting only 20 to 30%. That's why syndications are actually normally baked in with fees for the GP team. So that's where the GP team gets majority of their capital is from the fees that they charge on top of the splits that they get, right? Since they're only getting the smaller share of the splits. So the fees could be acquisition fees. You probably always heard about that, the big acquisition fee checks that people are getting, asset management fee, refinance fee, sale disposition fee, and I'm sure like there's others, right? But there can be fees for all those different steps. And all of that is actually kind of warranted because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Even just selling a property, if you have to get all, like, especially for the bigger deals, when you're selling a property, just think about what you're looking for when you're buying a property. You want the seller to have all these metrics lined up. They need to have their T12s. They need to have all their expense reports. They have to have everything proven and laid out. That's the same thing you have to do when you are the seller, right? So that's still like, of course, if you have property management company, which you should, and I won't say should, but some people are vertically integrated with the property management. But if you have property management company, then you also want to, they will take care of all that, but you still have to be on top of them to make sure that the numbers and everything is out there and that the package presentation for your deal is presented properly. That's still like a lot of work that you have to go through. So understanding that these fees make sense for the GP to want to charge because the GP has to eat. The getting 30% of the deal, and I'll show you some examples, is normally not enough to replace somebody's salary, right? So the acquisition fee can be a higher chunk of what someone, if they budget right, they can use that as their income for the year. So the other thing about fees is that private investors, nobody likes fees. If you have a brokerage account, if you have, if you're investing as an LP, you would rather most of your money come from investing in the deal and not going toward the fees that you're paying to the GP team. So if you are more experienced of an operator, then you can actually have more of a case for charging higher fees or offering lower splits. So that's where you might see a 60-40, where the GP team gets 40% of the split and the LPs get 60. So now why would an LP do that? Because if this GP team has a very extensive track record and proven success, maybe they would rather give up a little bit more of that equity to the GP that they know is going to give them a return because of they're more guaranteed than, I know investment is 100%, right? So they're more guaranteed that they're going to get a good return with this GP than a newer GP over here. So that's why a newer GP might have to offer 80-20, where they only take 20% of the split and they give the investors 80 because the investors taking a little bit more of a risk. So, when you're analyzing properties, sometimes a higher return is equated to a slightly higher risk in that property's profile. So if you're thinking like CD properties, you might be getting 15%, but that's because it's a harder property to manage and the tenant base and all of that. So there's levers, and you have to figure out what works for you and what your risk tolerance is, right? 1 second. I tried to warn them before not to be yelling in my Zoom call, and I cannot control a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. Girls, please go in the bedroom. Thank you. Okay. So I was saying about the fees, and if you're a more experienced operator, it more than likely gives you kind of reasoning, justification to give the investors a lower split or charge more in fees. Like some fees, some investors don't even like doing, like a refinance fee. So some investors will, and GPs will put a refinance fee in there, and some will think that that's just excess. They're not going to do that to their LPs, right? But it just all depends. So there's no cut and dry methodology for how you want to handle that with the fees. And you as a private investor even have to just figure out if that's the kind of deal that you want to invest in, and why you would or would not be okay with paying those extra fees. And I think, okay, so most investors, they know that a GP team is also not a team of one, right? Have you seen a one-person GP team before? Like anyone? Okay, no, I'm seeing Lawrence shake his head. So yeah, most times bigger deals have way too many moving parts, and one person can't handle that effectively. Even if you're hiring out, property management, your lender, and all the other people who help and get into the closing table, there's still so many other things happening, even just in the analyzation of a deal, that one person wouldn't be able to do that effectively. So GP teams, I've heard the optimal GP team is around, maybe 4 to 7 people in between there, but I've seen it going up to like 10, 12. So it really depends. And it depends on, the type of deal and who's the lead GP who found the deal and who they brought in to help with XYZ, right? So, so just putting that in perspective, that let's round it to 10 in between the low and in between the high. So, but if you have 8 to 10 people on a GP team, that 30% that the GP gets got to be split between 8 to 10 people. And that split is not always equal, because it depends on what you do and what you bring into the GP deal, right? What responsibilities, roles and responsibilities that you have. And that's where the splits come in. And so that's what we're going to talk about first. So I will share my screen here. Okay. Can you guys see that? You can see it? Okay. Let me start.
Yes.
Perfect. Of course, this is in the way. Oops, what is happening? Slideshow. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, so now this is where we get into the secrets of syndication. And so the first thing we're going to talk about are the extra splits once you're inside of the GP team. So everyone knows about the LP GP splits, but then there's further splits that happen. The first splits are normally in 5 buckets, right? So this is an example of the 5 different buckets that are standard. Latty, I'll send you this presentation. You don't have to write everything down. And you can share it with whoever else who's here who wants to have it. That's fine. So there's normally 5 different buckets for these splits. And this is not like a hard and fast rule. This is just general. This is kind of what happens across the board. Most people will use this as a general guideline. So your due diligence costs, when you're purchasing a building, there has to be upfront costs to acquiring the building. So those are some, if you're putting down like a EMD deposit, earnest money deposit. If you have to do any type of due diligence that requires capital, like your what am I thinking about? Like your appraisal and other things like that, like inspection. Inspection is first. So once you do that, so some of those things you have to need capital first. And some of that is sometimes that's called at-risk capital, because you need to do that to analyze and evaluate the deal properly. But at the same time, if the deal ends up being a dud, then most of that money is non-refundable, right? So that's the at risk. So people who can put up that money, they get a split of equity if the deal goes through, because they've risked that. Acquisition management, this is like the process of closing the deal. Like, are you finding the deal? Like, there takes a lot of time. Sometimes you have to underwrite 100 properties just to find one that makes sense. So that's a lot of time. Or you making time to get relationships with brokers so they can send you pocket listings. You're underwriting, you're submitting offers and LOIs, you're going through and doing the due diligence, and all of those, all that process is a big, you know, chunk of just getting the deal closed. That's normally what's glorified too in social media posting. You see most people talking about the acquisition process. They're talking about, oh, I went and searched this deal today, or you know, we did a walkthrough, or I underwrote these LOIs, or we put in these LOIs. So that's a lot of stuff that people talk about, because it's like the sexy part of doing these deals is finding the deal, right? Who could find the best deal? And then another bucket for the sponsor. So in commercial, in larger building especially, you got to have somebody sign on the loan who has a net worth equal to the loan amount, right? And a certain liquidity requirement, depending on, like, they have to cash in the bank equal to a certain amount. And that depends on the lender, right? So whoever that person is will normally get like 3%, 3 to 5%. Like, these are ranges, so it just depends. Investor relations is that can be grouped with raising capital. So raising capital and managing the investors over the life of the loan, communicating with them with your monthly or quarterly updates, you know, making sure distributions are correct, you know, going over the K1s and making sure that the accountant gets the K1s out in time. All of that is anything you have to do where you're talking to your investors. And asset management, honestly, that's the biggest part, because that's where you're actually implementing the business plan that you came up with during the due diligence phase. And if you cannot implement the business plan, you don't get the returns you expected. So asset management is all just making sure your property management company is doing what they're supposed to be doing and implementing things in an appropriate manner, being as efficient as possible, and all of that. So here is a slide about how those splits look when they are kind of situated. I'm not gonna say it, but yeah, 70%, 30%, 80-20. So this is like a general breakdown that you'll see between limited partners and general partners. But now the general partners, so these three columns are three different examples, right? So these are the buckets. There are more than 5 buckets here, because sometimes, like I said, it's not a hard and fast rule, but they will break up buckets in different ways. So this is just an example. So if you can see, like, deal C doesn't have deal sourcing as a capital bucket, right? So maybe they put that into the acquisition management, right? So you see acquisition management here. So maybe that deal sourcing is considered part of acquisition management for this particular bucket. You can have your at-risk capital, like I was saying. So the people who do that, who travel to the property, who buy flights or wherever that to do to get there, the earnest money deposit. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, acquisition management, that's that whole process to get to the closing table, including capital raising, or you can have capital raising in a different bucket with investor relations. So like I said, it's a little bit fluid with how the buckets are, the hard lines. There's no hard lines for the buckets, a little bit fluid, but each team will have their own indication for what their bucket is and what's included in each bucket as far as a responsibility. Here is a split spreadsheet. I have a link to this spreadsheet if anybody wants to use this whenever they're looking at deals and looking at what the GP team split is going to be. So this is just an example. So here we have the 80-20 that's still here. These are 5 different buckets. Deal sourcing, if you're allocating 30% to deal sourcing, then let's pretend this deal has 4 general partners, right? And this one partner found the deal. They brought the deal to the table. They get 100% of this 30% portion of the GP. And then so basically that's kind of how you go through if you're going through each of the different buckets. Risk money, everybody put in a little bit. Let's say partner 4 didn't have any capital, right? So he didn't put anything. He just gets nothing of the risk money bucket. Asset management, 2 people are going to do the asset management, and out of the equity raised, 3 people raise a lot of equity, and partner 4 ends up being the balance sheet guy. This is the or girl, this is the person who signed on the loan and did the loan guarantee. So they get 5% of this deal. It's 100%. They didn't have to do anything else for the deal. All they did was sign on the loan, which is, that's some people's business model. They just sign on loans and use that equity percentage as part of their investment strategy. Okay. And then, so the other thing to think about, that if you're looking at the totals, this last column over here, so you can see for the total deal, this is the deal, partner 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is what they get. So partner 1 did all this work across, he's getting 12% of the total deal. Partner 2's 4%, 3, almost 3%. Partner 1 is getting 1% of the total deal, even though he has 5% of the GP team. It equates to 1% of the total deal if you're thinking about that 80-20 split. So here on the bottom, you can see what that looks like for part of the GP, because that's why this here adds up to the 20%, because this is the GP portion. If you're looking about only the GP team's deal, the GP portion total, this is their split. So he's getting 60, partner 1 is getting 60% of the GP. But 60% sounds like a lot, but you're getting 60% of 20%. So it really equals 12% if you're thinking about the whole deal. So it can get complicated looking at, and that's why I like the spreadsheets, because it kind of breaks it down, does the math for you. But it can get complicated in how much cut of a deal you're going to get for a particular project, depending on what you're bringing to the table. This is an example of a deal that I did, that I was part of the GP team. I was a co-GP and I helped bring capital to the deal. And I also, it's a recent deal that just closed the fall of last year. So as we have more team meeting calls and things like that, and I reach out periodically and they'll assign me tasks. However, because I also wanted to do this to learn, so they'll assign me tasks as needed as we're going along through the process. But for the capital I brought to the deal, my split of the GP, we got 30%. Is the GP team here is 30%. So my split is 0.38%. I get a whole, not even 0.5%. And I am not downplaying that, because, and I'll explain a little bit more after this presentation as to what my goal was for doing syndications. And it's more than just the cash flow that I would potentially get from it, right? So I have other reasons behind it. But I'm also glad the way things worked out for me, because maybe I was a little shocked and didn't realize that my percentage would be so low. Also, it was my very first time raising capital. So it's not like I brought a plethora to the table. So this was all about increasing a skill set and learning how to do it and being a part of a larger deal and seeing what happens on the back end. And I'm very grateful for that, right? But just to show you, Article 2, these are Class A units, 30% of the overall ownership of the company. That's the GP team. Class A members, which is the GP, they'll receive a 3% acquisition fee, 2% asset management fee, 1% fee at refinance, and 1% disposition fee. So that is normally how, most teams try to keep the refi and disposition fees lower, but you get a majority of your cuts from the acquisition and then some from the asset management. Class B shares are the limited partners, and they're going to get 70% of the fee. But if you look at this, even looking at the splits from all the GP, and also how many GP members are in this team? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And some of these are LLCs. I didn't do this one in an LLC. I did another one in an LLC. But if you look at the points that, the percentage that everyone has, the highest percentage here is a 6.3. So that's 6.3% of the 30%. That's not even 6.3% of the deal, right? That's not the overall deal. That's of the GP, because that's why we know if this added up to 100, then we know that would be of the deal. Okay, so I just want to remember those two numbers. 6.3 is the highest, and 0.38, I am almost the lowest. There's somebody under me, but we'll just go with me as an example. Oh, there's a couple people under me, but we'll go with me as an example. So 6.3, 0.38. Now, this is a screenshot of our underwriting for that deal from before. Our acquisition fee at 3% is $305,000. Now that sounds like that's what everybody wants, right? Like you're doing a $10 million deal and you're getting $300,000 acquisition fee. Yes, I made it. I could quit my job. I can do all of this stuff now. I can go fly around the world. All of that from one deal, right? Let me pull out my calculator because I can't be doing this math in my head, and I should have just had it on this spreadsheet somewhere. But 305, 123, I'm not doing the 6699, times the 0.038. That's my percentage. No, actually, I got to do 0.0038. 0.0038. So that equals $1,159. And that is my cut of this $300,000 thing. And honestly, it ended up being less than that. I got like 900 and some change. So I didn't get to break that $1,000 mark, right? It's okay. 305, 123 times, what was that? 6.3? Was that the highest? 6.3? So that's 0.063. So the person who got the highest percentage cut out of this got a $19,200 acquisition fee. Now, that sounds a little bit more reasonable, but no one can quit their job off 19,000 from one deal, right? How many of these deals would you have to do if you're the highest percentage, member of the GP team and you need to quit your job? How many syndications of this size do you have to do to quit your job for a year? Probably at least 3 to 5, depending on where you live at and what you're living on, your family size, all the other stuff. But even to get $100,000, you need 5 of these. How many people are closing 5 deals, $10 million deals in a year? Not that many. That's a big, tall order, right? And not to say every deal is going to have the same split income. That there's some deals that are better, some deals are worse. It just depends on how everything's spelled out. But at the end of the day, the main reason for this is to open people's eyes and not let them assume that syndication is the answer to their financial worries. Especially, it can get to the point where if you are more experienced and you become the lead GP on a particular deal, and you're sourcing the deal, you're finding it, maybe you're boots on the ground in your asset management. There's people who do it and they end up getting a larger cut. Like you could get $1 million check from a property, right? Like, especially who knows what the back end sales, because you still own percentage. So when you sell, it's not just a disposition fee, you still get your appropriate share of the profits at the back end. So if you bought a great deal and you managed it well, and you have a good amount of the equity, right? And you double the size of this deal, then maybe you get a larger chunk at the back end. So with syndications though, it's almost like, people will downplay, well, not downplay, but like, say if you're a rehabber or a wholesaler, that's just like you got another job, right? Because you have to always find the next deal. If you are a syndicator, you always have to find the next deal. If that's the only one that you're doing, most syndications are not forever holds. Why? Because private investors want their capital back so they can redeploy it into another deal. So you could get capital back in a refi, redeploy that, but then they want their capital back, like their increased capital back again, so they can now have this larger chunk of money to go refi again. And it's all about the velocity of money, being able to speed that up and acquire more and invest it more and putting that money back to work. So there are some syndicators who like to have forever holds, or maybe forever hold is like 10 years in the syndication world. Sometimes it might be longer. And there are private investors who do like to invest that way because they do want to just hold things, have it go to a trust or whatever it is for more of a generational wealth play. But most investors in the syndication world, is always about getting more investors so you can get the next deal, because you have to keep doing this over and over for this to give you enough capital to sustain a lifestyle or give you that financial freedom lifestyle that you want. And it's still not completely passive if you are a GP, because you have to do asset management, right? You can't just, once you buy, be done. You have to make sure the property, you can't just leave it over to the property management company. You have to make sure that the property manager is doing things the way that is laid out in the business plan so that you can get the back end returns for yourself and for your investors. The other thing about that is, yes, that's why a team comes into play, because then it's not just only solely on your shoulders to do all of that. It can be split apart and split up between multiple people, which is great. But then that also means you get less share, right? So that is just, there's no wrong or right answer to whether you're doing syndications, but there is a way to think about syndications and to properly prepare for your expectations, to not over assume what you're going to get cash flow wise from being involved in a syndication. So my unpopular opinion is it may not actually be better to have a small slice of a watermelon rather than a whole big apple to yourself. I guess you guys know what I'm talking about there, because that's what a lot of people out there will say, go big or go home. It's better to have a small slice of a big pie than have a small pie or piece of crumb bread over here, right? And in theory, that sounds good and that makes sense. But when you really start looking at the numbers and you're looking at your capacity and what you can offer to a deal, then it may not work out that way. So unless you are really sure about the amount of capital that you can raise, especially in your first time or your second time, if you've never done it before, it may be harder than you think to get people on, no matter what your thought leadership platform is, no matter what, how much you post on social media, because I did all those things and it was still hard. Once I crossed that line over into actually raising capital, it was still very hard because it was a learning process for myself as well, to have those conversations and to cross over into are you looking to invest? How much capital do you have? Because once you start talking about people's capital specifically, it's a whole different thing than like writing a post on social media. Okay. So that's basically my secret about syndication is once you get on the inside, it's not as lucrative for people who are super new and trying to get started and get their feet wet. So what was I saying about, having some type of other mission, right? So know why you want to do syndications. So for me, I wanted to do syndications because I wanted to bring opportunity to my network, to people who did not know that syndication even existed and that they didn't have access to those types of opportunities because they didn't know anyone doing it, or maybe they weren't accredited. So if you're not accredited and you don't know anyone doing it, then you can't invest in these, right? Because the only two options are you have to be accredited or you have to know someone, right, who's doing it. So for the people who I was not targeting, but the people I wanted to help more, a lot of them are not accredited. A lot of them don't have 50K to put into a deal, which is normally a deal minimum, 50 to 75, right? So my ideal when I'm going to these deals, I would always ask the lead GP, is there any way we can do anything about the minimum? Can we go down a little bit? Like my people have maybe 25, something like that. So that's how I try to come in and frame it in a way that makes it more accessible to the people who are in my immediate community and the people that are looking for other things to like they know they need to invest, and they're at that stage where they know that generational wealth is becoming more important for them, and they know that that's something that they need to think about, but they don't know anything about real estate. They don't even have time to get started, right? They just want to put their little bit of capital that they do have, and I'm 25 is not little, but they want to put the capital that they do have to work, right? So that's where my mission for being involved in the syndication really stemmed from the mission of my company, which was to make these types of opportunities more accessible for other people, right? Especially people in my community. I was lucky when I started this that I did not start it because I was thinking I was going to get a lot of cash flow, and that I actually already had a couple of smaller buildings that I like to call microfamily in my portfolio. And these buildings are what were giving me the cash flow that I needed, that I could be able to, between this and my job, of course, that I'm able to not rely solely on syndication as my income source or my financial freedom number, right? So this 6-unit in PA is actually this, and this is 2022. So the rents have increased since then. I meant to update this slide and I didn't get a chance to, but yeah, the rents have definitely increased since then. We've had a couple of turns, but this building, it was a big value add for us. So we had to put a lot of money in renovations and in the turns, much more than a normal turn, because we had to update. There was a lot of deferred maintenance here. But right now, this is getting us $4K a month, which I have a joint venture partner on here. So that's $2K, split between us. And of course that fluctuates month by month, just depends on what's happening and what other expenses come around. Then the other thing is, this is my 3-unit that's in the Bronx. My 3-unit, I was actually about to sell last year and that fell through, but nothing happens by accident because God had other plans. And I was able to get a connection that got it rented for about $3,000 more than what I was renting it for previously, right? So now my monthly revenue is actually the Fed. The Fed, man, keeps raising these rates. My 3-unit is a one first position HELOC, right? So it's not a fixed income. It's not a fixed PITI. I'm paying interest only, but my cash flow is a little bit less now because the Fed keeps raising these rates. The good thing about this is it's still cash flows even with the Fed raising rates, and not by like $50. Like I'm still cash flowing a couple $1,000s a month, probably like 2.5 to 3 in between there, just because of the rates. But as soon as those rates come back down, I'll be looking at, I don't know if I'll refi or if I'll keep this. I have a few more years before this term is over, but I have some room to play. So that's what I love about real estate, is that especially smaller buildings, if you do things correctly, like you can have, the market can be doing whatever it's doing and you still can be cash flowing on the side, right? So that's why I like microfamily buildings more so than syndication, just because, what did I do? Oh, went to the back. Yeah, I like microfamily more than syndication, only because I feel like if you have a little bit of capital, or you can reach out and get the resources to either joint venture or do it on your own. Because I have a property management company on my 6-unit. Like I'm not managing that. I manage the 3-unit myself, but it's not mandatory that you have to self-manage a microfamily building, right? And so I think your control over what's happening, how long you want to hold it, not having to sell because your investors want you to, being able to keep more of that cash flow. Sometimes these smaller deals, especially depending on where they are, how you analyze, what you negotiate with the purchase, can return you a much higher reward. And so that's why I also teach this to people, right? And I've started a mentorship group on how to buy small multifamily and microfamily, because I think a lot of people getting started, they think about syndication as the big, sexy, ultimate goal, which it can be. And I don't discourage anybody from going after syndication, because like I said, I'm doing it because I had a bigger mission in mind, right? So just go in with your eyes wide open and know what you're getting into. And then you can plan appropriately for what syndication is going to do for your life and what skills or resources and things like that you're going to gain from being a syndicator. And that is it. Oh, I did not see the chat while I was talking. What is accredited? So an accredited investor is someone who makes, is it 2 or 300? 300,000. So 200,000. No, it's 300,000. No, 200,000, 300,000 if you're a married couple. Or has $1 million net worth, not including their primary home. So if you have either or, you don't have to have both. And there's no test, there's no accreditation. When you hear accredited, you think you have to have like a certificate or something, but there's no accredited certificate. There's none of that. Is really strictly based on income or net worth. Eight to 10 if you are the primary income source. Oh, 8 to 10 of these deals. Is that what you meant, Angel? Yeah, you need 8 to 10 of these deals, not even 5. 8 to 10 a year if you're the primary, if you're head of household. Anyone have any questions, any comments, anything you want me to clarify?
Nicole, I think you did give me something to think about when you talk about microfamily. So versus, investing in a syndication. So I just wanted to just say that.
Yeah. The other thing to think about, someone pointed this out to me, which I knew, but it kind of, when someone says it out loud, it makes more sense, that there's a lot of people out there buying these smaller individual deals, like one off by themselves or with a JV or things like that. You don't hear from them as much because they don't need to post on social media because they're not raising capital. You hear from syndicators, syndicators have to be loud because they need to attract capital. And the only way to do that is to post about it and to post the success stories of their current deals and what distributions they're giving to investors here and there. That's why all we see is syndication, because most of the people who are doing the smaller one-off deals don't really need to post, and social media posting is a full-time job. So if you can get that off your plate and focus on your real estate, that's what probably most people are going to do. But if you need to post on social media as part of your business plan, because that's the way you're going to attract capital, then that's why we see syndication. Syndicators have to be loud.
So question, right?
Yeah.
First of all, say, Nicole, thank you that you dropped some knowledge and some gem tonight. The question, so do you think that someone could be doing just the, like your term is microfamily, right? So what, when you say microfamily, how big do you think they should be going to microfamily? Because you said 3 units. So what would be your choice? You said you're doing a mastermind of this. So what would be the top?
I say, I really, microfamily is like 5 to 15. That's what I've defined it at.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I was thinking definitely sub 20 is what I would consider microfamily. And really micro to me means even smaller. So it really should probably be like under 10 and under. But no, I still have that edge of, I think it's like, is that want to go big or go home, but also not to go too big where it gets to that next other level and something that's manageable. So yeah, I would still be looking for a 20 unit. I think even me personally, but I also have a little bit more experience now, I'd be comfortable with like a 25 or under, right? But for what I'm teaching other people to do, I'm saying the 5 to 15 range, because most of the time, even 5 to 10 is where most people are comfortable if they only have like a couple of single family houses or they haven't started at all, right? That's where most people would be more comfortable starting to, as their, and it can be a whole business model to just buy a bunch of those smaller properties, but it can also be your stepping stone to some of the larger ones. If you want to have your experience, you want to grow your net worth so you can sign on larger loans yourself, you want to grow your cash flow and be in a stable position for yourself before you start targeting the larger buildings. So it could be a stepping stone, or it could be your business model as far as like your portfolio.
Okay. And next question. So did you suggest people just starting out with this micro family, as you call it, or small multifamily, right? You suggest they start in their backyard or look someplace else?
Oh no, not but and live where you want to live, invest where the numbers make sense. What's that, the real estate guys? So yeah, I don't believe you don't have to start in your backyard if you're doing microfamily. My two microfamilies, not the Bronx one, but the other ones are in Pennsylvania, which I'm in New York. So technically, I guess you could say backyard, but to me, my max driving capacity is like 2 hours and it's right on the edge of that. And I don't have the time to be driving 2 hours. I got a full-time job and 2 kids, if y'all saw them running around earlier, getting yelled at. But anyway, so I don't have the time or capacity to go out there on a regular basis, even if it's only 2 hours away. So to me, that's not my backyard. Right. So I have property management company for them. Like I have a team and another investor. So I leverage people heavily in my investing career.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. Anybody else has any questions? Okay, well, there's no more questions.
Does anyone, I like a little controversy. Does anyone strongly disagree with me? Anyone want to fight a little bit? No?
The X in the
Hey,
house.
I can play devil's advocate if you want me to.
I already know you agree with me, but you can play devil's advocate. I just wanted to know, but you know what? At the end of the day, there's no one size fits all. everyone is going to have, there's going to be people out there who disagree with me, right? And maybe that is a good way. If you really have no capital at all, you could get started with syndication, because you don't, that's the one thing about syndication, you don't have to bring your own capital to the deal and still be involved on the GP side, right? Your cut's going to be smaller, but that also depends on how much you can do for the deal skill set wise, or capital raising. So that is another way, and I don't think there's any wrong or right way. This whole presentation was about people being aware of what they were getting into.
Everybody, what works for you may not work for me, and works for me may not work for you. And investing is a varied field, right? So you may want to invest because you should go big, like you said before, go big or go home. Everybody's not ready for big go home, right? Maybe everybody just wants to just do what they do, what's good for them, right? That's what life is about. What's good for me, my path that I want to take to get to where I want to go to, So there's no questions. But I'll just say to everybody, thank you again, Nicole, for coming on, because I know you had your mommy duties going on before we got on, right? Mommy duties, they was running around. You had to shush them up a little bit, right? But before we go, right? That's why it was thank you for a great presentation. Before we go, can everybody please turn the camera on? I would like to take a picture. Angel says she can't put a halo on no more because they took the halo off, the dag off.
Oh, man.
Exactly.
Why did they do that? Zoom took it off?
Yes, the nerve of them.
Zoom.
They took away all the filters.
They took off, I didn't know that. Wow.
Maybe you just need to update your Zoom.
It was the update that took them away.
So can anybody please turn the cameras on, please? Olympia, if you can. Ethan, Waz. Okay, well, everybody got some beautiful pictures on the thing there. Okay, thank you.
Whoop, whoop.
Well, okay, there you go.
Ethan's even smiling.
Yeah.
If you pay me, I'll smile more.
It's all about the money, baby.
Latty will pay you in equity.
Hey, smile again.
Right,
Let's go again. There you go. Smile. There you go. Thank you again. Thank you everybody for coming. If we have time, you have time for a little breakout room, Nicole?
Yeah, I could do a breakout room.
I know you got two kids.
Well, Daddy has them in the bedroom now, so they can go to sleep. I still hear them in there, but
Okay.
even after they go to bed, I still got work to do. So I'll be up.
Wait, so we'll tell you we're gonna do a breakout room. Yep, there we go. There you go. Please hit join. Oh. Oh, no. Once again, everybody, thank you for coming on tonight, and see you next week. Oh. Nancy, let's connect some Nancy. Let's connect some. Mm-hmm. I'm like, let's tell you. This meeting back in shape. Let's get this thing back in shape.